Let's talk about one of the wildest political scandals in modern American history, the Iran-Contra affair. It's this tangled story from the 1980s about secret deals, illegal wars, and a constitutional crisis that went all the way to the top of the Reagan administration.
But here's the thing. It doesn't start in some back room in Washington. It starts right here, in the jungles of Nicaragua. October 1986, a cargo plane gets shot down, and when its lone American survivor is captured, well, he starts talking, and he pulls on a thread that's about to unravel a massive, secret operation.
So this survivor, he claims he's working for the CIA, shipping weapons to anti-government rebels. The US government, they immediately deny everything, flat out. But the damage was done. That plane crash had exposed something the White House was absolutely desperate to keep hidden. So what was this secret?
That crash, it wasn't just a spark. It was like lighting the fuse on a powder keg. In the weeks that followed, a series of bombshells just dropped one after another in the press, each one more shocking than the last, and it exposed a covert foreign policy running completely in the shadows.
I mean, just look at how fast this all fell apart. November 3rd, a magazine in Lebanon breaks the news. The U.S. is secretly selling weapons to Iran. 10 days later, President Reagan has to go on TV and admit it's true, but he denies it was some kind of arms for hostages deal. Then, key people at the National Security Council are fired or resign. And then, the big one. November 25th, the Attorney General connects the dots for everyone, revealing that money from the Iran arms sales was illegally sent to rebels in Nicaragua. Boom. The scandal had officially exploded.
Okay, so to really get what happened, we need to rewind a little bit and look at the first piece of this whole puzzle. A secret war that was brewing down in Central America. So here's the situation. Back in 1979, a left-wing group called the Sandinistas took power in Nicaragua. The Reagan administration, looking at this through a classic Cold War lens, saw a huge threat. They saw a communist domino about to fall, backed by Cuba and the Soviet Union right in their backyard. So to fight back, the CIA started secretly funding and training a rebel group they called the Contras.
And President Reagan was personally all in on this. He didn't just support the Contras, he championed them, famously calling them the moral equivalent of our founding fathers. That quote right there tells you everything you need to know about the deep ideological conviction driving this whole thing.
But there was one massive problem. Congress was not on board, not at all. After hearing about atrocities committed by the Contras and the CIA mining Nicaragua's harbors, Congress passed something called the Boland Amendment, and this law was crystal clear. It explicitly banned any U.S. government funding for the Contras, period.
So right there, you have a direct confrontation. Congress had used its power to cut off the money. The White House, though, was determined to keep its secret war going, with or without the law on its side. A line had been drawn.
But get this. While the administration was scrambling to figure out how to illegally fund one secret war, they were running another, even more shocking operation. And this one involved one of America's biggest enemies.
This is the other half of the scandal. And for a lot of people, this was the part that was just mind-blowing. Iran, right? Since the 1979 hostage crisis, they were an adversary. Publicly, the U.S. policy was ironclad. We do not negotiate with terrorists. So why on earth was the Reagan administration secretly selling them missiles? Well, there were basically two secret motives. First, Iran was in the middle of a brutal war with Iraq, and they were desperate for American-made weapons. Second, the administration hoped that by making this deal, they could get some leverage with Iran to help free 7 American hostages who were being held in Lebanon by Hezbollah, a group with really close ties to Iran. So now we have two secret and illegal operations, one to arm rebels in Nicaragua, the other to sell weapons to Iran. The absolute core of the Iran-Contra scandal is how the White House secretly connected the two.
And this slide just lays out the deception so clearly. Publicly, the policy was firm. No arms to Iran. No money for the Contras. But secretly, inside the National Security Council, a totally different policy was being carried out. They were doing the exact opposite of what they were telling the American people.
So how'd they do it? It was actually a pretty slick, off-the-books operation, kind of like something from a spy movie. Officials inside the National Security Council, guys like Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, sold missiles to Iran at crazy high prices. Then the profits, instead of going to the U.S. Treasury where they belong, were diverted into a secret Swiss bank account. And that money was then used to buy weapons for the Contras in Nicaragua. The whole scheme was designed to completely bypass Congress and the law.
And we're not talking about pocket change here. All told, the secret sales to Iran brought in about $30 million. That's a huge sum of money operating completely outside of any government oversight.
So what happened to that $30 million? This chart breaks it down for us. About $12 million of it did make its way back to the U.S. government, but the majority, a whopping $18 million, was illegally diverted to fund the Contra War, a direct, blatant violation of the Boland Amendment.
Well, once this whole scheme was out in the open, the political fallout was just immense. It led to some really high-stakes investigations, hearings that were broadcast all over the country, and a huge debate about the limits of presidential power.
A presidential commission basically criticized President Reagan for his hands-off management style. The congressional hearings became must-see TV, and they turned Oliver North into this really controversial celebrity. Key figures, including North, were actually convicted of serious crimes like obstructing justice. But, and this is a crucial twist, their convictions ended up getting overturned because they'd been granted immunity to testify before Congress.
And yet, here's the really strange part. Despite all of this, President Reagan's popularity turned out to be incredibly resilient. I mean, his approval rating took a nosedive to 46% when the scandal broke. But look at this. By the time he left office, it had bounced all the way back up to 63%. It's why he got the nickname the Teflon President, because nothing seemed to stick.
And if you thought this story couldn't get any darker, well, it did. A later Senate investigation led by Senator John Kerry found that the Contra supply network was also being used as a drug pipeline. The committee found that the very same planes flying weapons down to Central America were used to fly cocaine back into the United States on their return trips. Just unbelievable.
The final chapter of this whole affair came on Christmas Eve, 1992. President George H.W. Bush, who had been Reagan's vice president, issued pardons to 6 major figures involved in the scandal. And just like that, it effectively shut the door on any more legal consequences for the people at the top.
You know, the Iran-Contra affair really forced a national debate about secrecy, accountability, and the rule of law. It showed how a small group of officials who were convinced they were doing the right thing could just create their own secret foreign policy and bypass the Constitution. And it leaves us with a question that is just as relevant today as it was back then. In the name of national security, how far is too far?